Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another fascinating topic. Today we're going to tackle a tricky one, and I'm so glad to have you here to help break it all down.
You know, I love a good brain teaser. What we got?
So we're talking about two conditions that often get confused. Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD for short, and lissencephaly.
Yeah, I can definitely see how those two get mixed up sometimes.
Right. On the surface, they seem similar, but like you said, it's a brain teaser. Before we unpack all the differences, though, can we do a quick recap of what ASD is? For those who are just joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely. When we talk about ASD, we're basically talking about the ways that it affects how people interact with the world around them. Imagine having trouble understanding those unspoken social rules or getting completely overwhelmed by like loud noises or bright lights.
Sensory overload is definitely a real struggle for some.
It is. And then you can also have folks with ASD who find a lot of comfort in routines and repetitive behaviors. It manifests in so many different ways.
Which is why it's called a spectrum, right? Every individual experiences ASD in their own unique way.
You got it. It's about as individual as fingerprints. Now, lissencephaly, that's a whole other ballgame.
And this is where we get into the whole smooth brain thing, right? I've heard that term used, but I'm not totally sure I get it.
You got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
picture a normal brain, right? The surface is all wrinkly. It's covered in these folds and grooves. They've got fancy names, Dree and Sulci.
Sciencey terms. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. But those wrinkles, they're important. They basically maximize the surface area of the brain. More wrinkles, more brain power.
Makes sense. So with lissencephaly,
With lissencephaly, those folds are like almost completely absent, hence the term smooth brain.
so the brain is literally smoother.
Yeah, and less surface area means there's less space for all those brain cells to do their thing, which, obviously has a big impact on how the brain functions.
Starting to think where this is going.
We're talking about potential cognitive impairments, challenges with motor skills. It's a lot.
So even everyday things that most people take for granted could be a huge struggle.
Exactly. And on top of all that, many individuals with lissencephaly, they also experience seizures and developmental delays, and sometimes you even see distinctive facial features.
Wow, okay. So we've got these two conditions. On the surface, they share some similarities, like you might see developmental delays or maybe some social interaction challenges. But when you really dig
You
in,
realize that they are totally different. They are two distinct conditions.
totally. And knowing the difference is absolutely crucial, right? Especially when we're talking about getting the right diagnosis and the right support.
100%. And that's something we should definitely dig into more.
So how do you even begin to figure out what's going on? If someone is showing signs that could, point in either direction, where do you even start?
Well, it's definitely not a simple answer. And honestly, it underscores just how important it is to have that really comprehensive approach to diagnosis.
Okay, so walk me through it. What does that look like?
So you're going to want to do a deep dive into their medical history. If genetic testing is an option, that's going to be really valuable too.
Makes sense.
And then just really careful observation, How are they behaving? How are they developing? Are there any patterns or like red flags popping up?
So it's not like one test and you're done. It's really a process.
Definitely a process. And honestly, this is where having a multidisciplinary team can be a game changer.
What, like a whole team of doctors?
Yeah, you want to have neurologists involved, developmental pediatricians, if you can get a geneticist in the mix, even better. The more brains you have working together on this, the better.
It really highlights how much is still unknown about both ASD and lissencephaly, let alone the two of them together, which I guess can happen, right?
No, absolutely. Someone could be diagnosed with both, and that's where things get really interesting, but also really complex.
So then what? How do you support someone who has both conditions?
Well, you got to throw out the rule book, that's for sure. Every individual is going to need a completely unique approach.
Right, because ASD is a spectrum, and then you're layering on top of that all the complexities that come with lissencephaly.
Exactly. You're talking about a highly individualized plan tailored to that specific person's strengths and challenges.
Okay, so no one-size-fits-all solutions here. What might that actually look like in the real world, though? What kind of support are we talking about?
It could be a mix of different therapies: speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, really anything that helps the individual build skills and become more independent, And of course, if they're dealing with seizures or other medical needs, managing those is going to be a top priority.
It sounds like a lot for a family to navigate.
It absolutely is, which is why support networks are so essential. It's so important for these families to be able to connect with others who understand what you're going through.
To share resources, get advice, know they're not alone.
100%. When you're dealing with a diagnosis that not a lot of people understand, it can feel incredibly isolating. Having that community makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to build the plane while you're flying it. It sounds incredibly overwhelming, but I guess that's where the power of community really comes in. Having those connections must make such a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not even just about the practical support, although that's obviously huge, right? But it goes deeper than that. It's about feeling seen, feeling understood, like your experience matters. That validation, it's priceless for both the individual and their families.
Totally. And it makes me think about, on a larger scale, how we as a society approach this whole idea of neurological diversity.
Yeah.
What are we really saying when we label something as different?
That's such an important question. And I think these conditions, whether we're talking about ASD or lissencephaly or any other neurological difference, they really force us to check our assumptions at the door.
To really challenge our definition of what normal even means.
Right. Because who gets to decide that anyway? These individuals, they're out there living their lives. And they're showing us that there are so many ways to move through the world, so many ways to learn, so many ways to connect.
It's beautiful, really. So much to learn from each other. Well, we've covered a ton today. For our listeners out there who are maybe personally touched by these conditions, or maybe they know someone who is, what's the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive?
I think it really boils down to this. Knowledge is power, for sure, but empathy. Empathy is everything. The more we understand about these conditions, the more we open our hearts to different ways of being, the more inclusive and supportive our world becomes for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah,
It's been amazing chatting with you today, as always. Thanks for lending your expertise to this deep dive.
anytime. These are the conversations we need to be having.
Absolutely. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us today. If you want to learn more about ASD and lissencephaly, we've got tons of information on our website, plus links to some amazing support organizations that are doing incredible work. Until next time, stay curious and keep those minds open.